Hello kids, the book we are going to read today is Enemy Pie, written by Derek Munson and illustrated by Tara Callahan King. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a tree house in our backyard, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood. I did not like Jeremy Ross. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too. But he knew of a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. "Tell you how? I'll show you how," he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. "Enemy pie," he said. You may be wondering what exactly is an enemy pie. I was wondering too. But Dad said the recipe was so secret he couldn't even tell me. "I will tell you this," he said. "Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies." What kind of things would I put into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he'd need those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing on all morning. He gave it right back to me. I went out to play. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. And all the while, I listened to the sounds of my dad making enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell or what it would look like. But when I was in the backyard, I smelled something really good. It was coming from a kitchen. I was a bit confused. I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. "If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it," he said. I could tell he had made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang and Dad pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out or their breath stinky? I asked Dad, but he was of no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. He talked quietly. "There is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. "Can you play?" I asked. He looked confused. "I'll go ask my mom," he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. After lunch, we went over to my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice. But of course, I couldn't tell Dad that, since he had worked so hard to make this enemy pie. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house and into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my tree house. My tree house was my tree house. I was the boss. And if Jeremy wanted in, "Can we go in it?" he asked. I knew he was going to ask me that, but he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list. And enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me to throw a boomerang. And he did have me over for lunch. And he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. "Okay," I said, "but hold on." I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. We played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and when he came out to get us, we tried to hide from him. But somehow he found us. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner. I was beginning to think that we should just forget about enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. "Dad," I said, "it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood." I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was just pretending. He passed one to me and one to Jeremy. "Wow," Jeremy said. It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. "Jeremy, don't eat it. It's a bad pie. I think it's poisonous or something." Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumpled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. "If it's so bad," Jeremy asked, "then why has your dad already eaten half of it?" I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. "Good stuff," he mumbled through a mouthful. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds, and neither of them was losing any hair. It seemed safe enough, so I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he would teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get an answer, because I just lost my best enemy. So children, did you like the story? Stay tuned for many more such interesting stories. Do like and subscribe the channel. Bye. Thanks for watching.